So like as you guys can see and as you came here, we're going to be talking about the psychology of my favorite anime, Psychopaths. So I'm Heather Ness. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology. So that's a background in mental health, talking about disorders, diagnoses, and treatment. I go by Super Psych on the internet where I take that very particular lens and analyze mostly superheroes, but as well as different animes and video games.
I guess practice it. My name is Avery Moody. I'm a graphic designer and musician by day, and by all other times I really like to dive into pop culture, anime. In all of my endeavors and in my work, I like to reverse engineer what I'm looking at. When I design things, I take a look at different advertisements or designs that I really like, try to figure out what elements I like, and I put those into my work. Same thing in my music, and same thing when I'm trying to write stories, design stories. I like to look real close, figure out what makes the stories tick, so I can write better stories.
So that's a lot of rhetoric, basically?
Mm-hmm.
Do you use a lot of rhetoric in like putting your stuff together?
Wait.
I'm sorry, taking AP seminars, so I'm like learning all about rhetoric right now. Like, you have to use ethos, pathos, logos.
Yeah, like the different concepts. Yes. Yeah. I have a bachelor's in communications, so I sought the bachelor's in communications because I was like, oh, I'm going to be communicating with people for a long time, and I don't know how to do it very well. So let's spend a couple of years trying to figure out how to do that better. Now I'm here.
Alright, so let's jump into Psychopath.
Yeah. So firstly, I wanted to look at the main genre of Psychopaths, figure out our setting so we can figure out what context the story of Psychopaths is trying to, what way it's trying to tell us. There's a lot of different definitions of science fiction. I found a really good one by Isaac Asimov. He wrote the iRobot series, wrote tons of books, created this universe where robot technology existed, has like 3 rules that the robots have to follow. The movie iRobot is set in his universe. The movie Bicentennial Man is set in his universe that he created. So he knows what he's talking about when he says what science fiction is. He says science fiction can be defined as that branch of literature which deals with the reaction of human beings to changes in science and technology. And yeah, that pretty much defines, that's my working definition of science fiction. But within science fiction, around the 60s and 70s, there was this offshoot of science fiction that eventually became known as cyberpunk. The term was coined by Bruce Bethke in 1983, but that was about the middle of the cyberpunk movement. He was kind of looking back over the past couple decades and trying to put a name to what had been happening. He sat down, made a list of words meaning technology, made a list of words meaning troublemaker, and he came up with cyberpunk because he thought it was the catchiest. And then he wrote a book called Cyberpunk. So basically, according to him, the main hallmarks of a cyberpunk story are set in post-industrial dystopias featuring the widespread social effects of a rapid change in technology. One of the most famous cyberpunk universes, you have Philip K. Dick's novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, where Blade Runner is based off of. He used that as an example. You can see the people in the society of Blade Runner dealing with the new technology of replicants and how that affects their lives. There's also a data sphere of computerized information. So just like big data, tracking is a big thing. Law enforcement has a lot of power. And or invasive modification of the human body are a few of the themes in cyberpunk. So, in cyberpunk stories, you have that big change in technology. That's going to be that big data, and it's going to be invasive body modifications, and that's become kind of socially recognized in a society, in the setting of a cyberpunk story. But the thing that puts the punk in cyberpunk is the stories will always feature social movements that challenge and push the limits of the established technology. For example, in the Blade Runner, you have replicants becoming sentient, and that's the new thing that changes the technology. And in Psychopaths, we have the civil system as the overarching technology that everyone's dealing with. But then you have these like people that can walk around without being examined by the civil system. You have helmets that let people walk around and stretch the limits of the civil system. Traditionally, hackers are a big idea in cyberpunk. You have technology, like computers, that have become very socially accepted, but then you have this movement of people that are able to take advantage and use that technology in ways that it had never been used before. So J.G. Baylor, he's an author active in the 60s and 70s, wrote a lot of sci-fi short stories that helped to define what would eventually become what cyberpunk is. He attacked the idea of universal story structure. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Joseph Campbell and his hero with 1,000 Faces, his monomyth. But he said that pretty much all stories have a certain pattern, from Greek myths through Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. They have a set pattern of a hero going on a journey. He laid out a bunch of different steps. Well, Baylor attacked that idea, and he sought to create a unique story. In his own words, he says, "We want to create a style with more psycho-literary ideas, more metabiological and metachemical concepts, private time systems, synthetic psychologies and space-times, more of the somber half-worlds one glimpses in the paintings of schizophrenics." And to be honest, I don't know exactly what he meant by that last sentence. But with that, taking that, when we're looking at analyzing the story structure, it's important to note that what genre we're working in. The Psychopaths were working in the genre of cyberpunk, definitely. It fits all the criteria, and with that, we shouldn't be examining the stories for digging out a hero's journey, because that's not what cyberpunk is about. Not that you can't have a hero's journey. The Matrix, the very first Matrix movie, is a textbook cyberpunk universe while also featuring a textbook monomyth. But it means that in the genre of cyberpunk, that's not the purpose of all the stories. The purpose is more that trying to establish that the aesthetic of a painting of a schizophrenic. So the universe is more important than the story structure. So Heather's going to talk about what makes up that universe in the specifics.
So, like you were saying, the cyberpunk is more about the setting, the society, and how that's a reflection of usually a reflection of our own society. So, like normally, if I'm taking some sort of story and working with it, I'm going to look at a character and like, what is that character's motivations? In the Death Note one that we had earlier today, I talked about specific characters and diagnosing them. With Psychopaths, I didn't do that. Because while there are really fantastic characters, and you could even say that a client might go on her own hero's journey in some definition, the real story or the reflection that we should get from it has to do with the society that Psychopaths takes place in. So in this society, we have the civil system. And it's basically, it's running the society. We have these very adorable, non-confrontational, or, drones who are they're checking people for their cues. They are reading their, we'll talk in a second, but they're reading these people's vibrations to figure out how stressed are they and how likely are they to commit a crime. And then if they get to a certain point where it's like, yeah, they're actually fairly likely to commit a crime or do something dangerous, the drones read that, then you can send the people off for therapy to get their psychopaths down, their coefficient down. The detectives have these guns called the Dominators. The Dominator, portable psychological diagnosis and suppression system. So the Dominator, like the drones, are also able to read a person's psychopaths, their hue, their crime coefficient, read how likely they are to commit a crime and be dangerous. And if the Dominator says this person is fine, then the detective can't possibly shoot them. But if the Dominator says they're at this certain level, we have to either paralyze them and take them back to therapy, or if they're past the point of any type of rehabilitation, we'll just kill them. And so the civil system is what operates all of these Dominators, these street scanners or security drones, reading the different crime coefficients. And there's a removal of responsibility from the detectives, because they're told, if it, as in the Dominator, tells you to shoot, just do it. The decision has already been made for you. You don't need to make the call. And if they say not to shoot, then it's not up to you to judge this other person. The civil system is what does it. So the people who are identified as having too high of crime coefficients, or if their hues, their stress levels are too, referred to as cloudy, they're too high, they're too stressed out, they're referred to as latent criminals. They haven't committed a crime yet, but they're very likely to. They're predicted to be very likely to. And so one of the detectives says about somebody who is an enforcer, a latent criminal who's given a job to help the detectives, he said, don't think that the guys you're about to meet are humans like us. Their psychopath crime coefficients exceeded a specific value. So once they're labeled as being likely to commit some kind of crime, if they're likely to be dangerous, they're put into a whole other category. They're not even thought of as human at that point. Which got me thinking about this term from psychology called the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's very much where if you label someone a certain way, and they start to believe that they are that label that you have given them, then they're going to meet your expectations. And the way that psychologists came up with this term is there was a research study where these researchers gave kids a fake IQ test. They didn't really test the intelligence level of these kids, but they made out like they did. And then they told the teachers, here's the smart kids, here's the average kid, here's the dumb kids. But they didn't actually do any kind of testing. They just randomly put them in these groups. And then all of a sudden, the teachers started acting different towards these kids. Maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously, I don't know. But they did. And then the kids who were labeled as really intelligent, they started getting better grades. And the kids who were labeled as not all that intelligent started doing worse than they had before. So they came up with this term, the self-fulfilling prophecy. You label someone that could lead them to acting a certain way. They start to believe that they are what you have called them. So in the show, there's this character named Akura, and he, just in the first episode, he is labeled by one of the security drones as his crime coefficient as being too high. And it wasn't too bad yet. He could have gone to therapy for rehabilitation. But he ran off instead. So he runs off, And because his crime coefficient was labeled as too high, and this man had never done anything ever before, but because he was told it was too high, then he was like, well, since it's too high, let me just do what I want then. And he kidnaps a woman and rapes her, and then was willing to kill other people and everything. Would he have done that if the security guard hadn't told him that his crime coefficient was too high? They also talk about, with latent criminals, they say that terrible misunderstanding and rumors about latent criminals were common in those days. If a family member happened to show a high crime coefficient, that alone caused the rest of the family to be treated as if they were the same. Which got me really thinking about, because again, I look at these things through a very specific lens. It got me thinking about mental health stereotypes. How, one, people who are given whatever kind of mental health diagnoses, say bipolar, once other people know you have been given this label, a lot of times it seems like society will make assumptions about you.